China is actively exploiting maritime access across Africa to undermine U.S. interest and to position itself as the dominant power in the region. Beijing is securing port access, building dual-use infrastructure, expanding illegal fishing fleets, and leveraging debt to gain long-term strategic footholds. The result is a slow but deliberate remaking of maritime power in China's favor. This first question is to all three of the witnesses. Walk us through specifically how the Chinese are exploiting African maritime access, and what would Chinese dominance of key choke points mean for global shipping, energy access, trade flows, and the security of allies who rely on those routes? Mr. Sylvester, we'll start with you.
Thank you, Senator, for the question. And I think it's extremely important to look at the African continent, but also Chinese influence in maritime globally. So actually, I would start upstream of what you had mentioned and look at the maritime space as a whole. So for example, China controls 95% of the container manufacturing for cargo globally. They control 60% of the shipbuilding globally. They have one of the largest shipping lines in the world as a state-owned enterprise. So in order to counter this, of course, as you know, President Trump signed the Restoring America's Maritime Dominance Executive Order in April that prescribed different steps for reindustrializing and rebuilding American shipbuilding capacity. So I would start there because with those supply chain advantages, China can not only direct where ships go, but also refuse to actually send ships to American-aligned ports, not just encourage investment in Chinese-aligned ports. The second thing I would mention here is the predatory lending schemes that we've seen across the continent. So China many times will undercut U.S. bids with upfront cash that have many strings attached and really exploit the host countries to ensure permanent control over those strategic locations. The third thing I would say is to the dual use point that they've shown the willingness to militarize these commercial investments either nearby or at the ports themselves.
Ms. Nardi?
Yeah, thank you, Senator, for that question. I would start with coastal West Africa, where we definitely see a very intense Chinese effort to build ports, port facilities, training facilities, or different sort of, I would say, surveillance operations. When we saw that happening in Gabon, we decided to try to reach out to the government to work with them to make the United States the partner of choice and to talk to them about what we could do for them and also their own responsibilities, how we could make them stronger and more self-sufficient. And as a result of that, we are working on a $1 million port security program and giving $4 million worth of fast boats for them to increase patrolling of the waters around that area. In Côte d'Ivoire, where we've seen that there's a lot of unknown vessels that are flagged Ivoirian, we are working with them to try to strengthen their flag recognition and limitations to prevent Chinese or others from using their flags for illegal vessels. We are looking at the opportunity to use satellite information to do better tracking of unknown or suspicious vessels that are out in that region. And we are doing a lot of training regionally as well through Interpol, UNODC, and others to get those countries to work together to share information and also to arrest and prosecute those who are related to Chinese illegal fishing. But to your point, there are already, and I think you mentioned this earlier on, the impacts of IUUF certainly are being seen where fishermen do not have an ability to make a livelihood, and so they turn to narco-trafficking. They'll go out into the waters to pick up dead drops and move drugs that will go on to Europe, either with the help of Balkan networks, Nigerians, or others. Increased immigration as well. Emigration from Senegal to the United States has increased significantly over the last several years. We believe part of that is because of the impact to livelihoods there. So there are a lot of immediate impacts already. The longer-term impact, as my colleague noted, looking at the bigger picture, we're seeing out in the Pacific where China is offering to serve as the Navy for islands that don't have their own Navy or their own Coast Guard, and we'll do it for you. You don't need to worry about that. So that is something that we are also watching in coastal West Africa as a potential threat.
Dr. Perry?
Thank you for the question. As you heard from my colleagues, covered much of the land and port side of this and how it starts to disrupt maritime flows. Let me reinforce the impact that you're talking about through your question, Senator Cruz. China's fleet has tens of thousands of vessels in Africa and has $3.8 billion in total annual catch. This kind of scale, and combined with state subsidies and weak enforcement, allows China to not only exploit those fisheries resources at all levels of the ecosystem and create ecocide through their fishing practices, but also takes away hundreds of thousands of artisanal fisheries jobs from West Africa and other African nations. Chinese trawlers are backed by state subsidies, and they dominate and outcompete the fishers, as I've mentioned. Weak regulations and limited enforcement allow for illegal practices such as fishing in prohibited zones and using destructive gear. These socioeconomic impacts are severe, and Chinese industrial fishing fleets have contributed to significant overfishing and habitat destruction in West African waters. So what are we doing to combat that? I mentioned the SAFET Act. I'm the newest co-chair alongside my NOAA and U.S. Coast Guard colleagues, which brings together 21 federal agencies to develop and implement strategies for priority regions. IUU fishing, including Africa, but also the Pacific, is a priority for both the Secretary and the Deputy Secretary at the Department of State. And now we are combining a statewide approach to close the gap that China has created. But there are also good practices. You heard that this is a combination of monitoring, surveillance, and enforcement. For example, our work with Ghana has made significant progress in many of these areas. So I won't recapture the monitoring and surveillance that you heard, but I'll just add that we've also been able to work with partners through our diplomacy to improve legal structures so that when we monitor and detect illegal fishing, and particularly Chinese interest, that these countries like Ghana can actually enforce and respond and take the threat away. So in addition to the increased technology, increased maritime domain awareness, we're also working on legal structures and training so that the enforcement can actually prove results.